Wait, stop. I know what you have to do for one of these podcasts. You gotta do media res, but like sometimes like videos do, like the black and white, and then have you catch up literally 1 minute later. After that point.
The podcast within a podcast, the DnD podcast within the read of a healer. So, guys, we did not finish the previous podcast and start this one after it, correct?
Oh, definitely not. That would be unprofessional.
Yeah, this is us in media res as redo the healer itself. This is just us doing this right now.
Yes.
Wait, stop. I know what you have to do for one of these podcasts. You gotta do media res, but like sometimes like videos do, like the black and white, and then have you catch up literally 1 minute later. After that point.
This is a good gimmick. This is like confront this. This is a good one.
Oh yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So now we're going to talk about.
Okay, we should probably start now.
Yeah, we are going to talk about DnD right now. So, guys.
Titan, clap when you want to start real version.
1, 2, 3. All right. That's the. Yeah. Okay. So guys, what's your favorite class in DnD?
Okay, this is boring. Let's try to take this into an interesting direction. Like, okay, D&D talk. What can we talk about D&D that would be actually interesting?
Fantasy racism. I mean, our whole thing is talking about more problematic things from a leftist perspective.
Fantasy racism is an interesting take, Alex. So, okay.
So, to define my terms for the audience, fantasy racism is racism in a work of fiction dealing with actual not humans.
Yeah, and this is interesting. This is actually something that in D&D interests me a lot because like you have different races, right? That you can create your characters as, and they have different racial bonuses, which always like peeved me the wrong way. Because they are so pigeonholing like races into specific play styles, and they are implying a lot about these races. Now this has gone so much better over the years. I mean, we all do remember that in 3rd edition D&D, orcs did have -2 to intelligence, which kind of a bad look.
In 5e, they still had that. The pure orcs, not the half orcs, but the pure orcs still had that. Then it was changed, I think, in Everon, and now in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you can actually reassign your ability modifier, racial ability modifiers. You can customize it to put the +2 in anywhere you want and the +1 anywhere you want.
So I think the problem here is like we're dealing with like from the mindset initially of the races, of thinking of them as like other races the way we do in like real life. But I think the thing with fantasy racism we have to acknowledge is there's actually going to be biological differences. Like, for example, you guys know that Neanderthals weren't the only human like race, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if any of the other ones survived, there'd probably be actually observable differences from them actually having different brain structure.
Just for the sake of like scientific clarity, when you say a different race, you mean a different subspecies, because
yes,
all humans existent today are the part of the same species. There are no human subspecies. It's all just Homo sapiens. But yes, Neanderthals were a subspecies.
Yes.
That would get into like my problem with like fantasy not understanding what the word species means. If there can be like half like orcs, then they're part of the same species. Because the species is just a population that can breed and produce children that are fertile.
Yeah, but there.
Yes, in which case you're. But in that case, your entire argument about biological differences disappear, because clearly all of these creatures in D&D are a part of the same species because they can all interbreed.
Yeah.
Although that's probably definitely a thing like for normal D&D.
I don't think
that's a good point.
I don't think all of them, because I've never heard of like half gnomes and half dwarves. I've heard of half elves. I've heard of half orcs, but I never heard of half dwarves. So I guess dwarves and gnomes are different species.
Goblins?
Okay, yeah. Goblins also different species. Yes.
Yeah. Also, the problem is with the ability scores is that intelligence is not real. Like, it's not. It's you cannot say you are, like IQ is failed as a test, for example, because it's not really.
It wasn't even designed to be a test.
Yeah.
It was designed by a French teacher who was upset with the lack of standardized testing, making it hard to identify which kindergarteners needed extra help. It was not intended to be an intelligence test. It was intended to test how well kindergarteners, I need to stress this, kindergarteners are doing.
Indeed. So you cannot measure intelligence in like if you wanted to measure intelligence, it will need to be like at least 9 or 6 stats, 6 different stats for memory, shape, shape recognition,
Mathematics,
pattern recognition, mathematics,
lateral thinking.
They're
And
Don't
like,
know the full list off the top of my head.
and this is this is also completely ignoring the fact that none of those actually have place in D&D, because in D&D intelligence like just adds to what, to your knowledge skills. Like if we're
Intelligence basically relates to education.
Yeah.
Because it just ups the skills that you would get by reading.
Yeah, if we actually tried to apply the human concept of IQ to intelligence, then like perception would be based in intelligence, because like a big portion of IQ test is like pattern recognition and spatial understanding, and that's perception, baby.
Yeah. Also, most of the things that intelligence does could be replaced with memory, for example, which can be like a singular stat. Now, there's still a lot of problems with that, but it is much better than just saying intelligence.
And then you also get into wisdom, and it's like you're trying to quantify experience, which like you already have quantity of experience. It's called XP. Why did you also make it a stat?
Yeah.
The way my GM has reeled it is that wisdom is like street smarts and intelligence is like math and shit like that.
But wisdom is demonstrably not street smarts.
Yeah, it's perception and insight, which is like it's okay. Insight might be street smarts, but perception, I don't think so. And there's also medicine, which is not that should be under intelligence, because
I'm playing a goblin doctor right now with 20 intelligence. I have to say, it's really fucking annoying having like my thing as a healer be under the stat I don't use. Why is wisdom tied to it? I went to medical school.
Like it's obvious that it's tied to wisdom because it's a cleric spellcasting ability. So obviously clerics and paladins in previous editions. Clerics and paladins are supposed to be good at healing outside of casting healing spells.
Yeah.
That was sort of the idea. But none of this makes sense like realistically.
yeah, I love how my wizard knows more about religion than the cleric does.
Yeah, because for a cleric, intelligence. Yeah, because for a cleric, obviously intelligence is going to be a dumb stat. Like it doesn't boost any resistance rolls. It doesn't do anything for them. So like, why would you have intelligence?
Although on a previous point, can I like to make a addendum to it?
Sure, Alex.
It was on intelligence not being real. I think if you look on like a broader sense, and not within the sense of like fucking Nazi idiots and right wingers that don't know the first thing about genetics, but like there probably is some truth to that, because we are the result of material processes. So, and the difference between you and a squirrel is genetic. It's just the way proteins arrange itself. So it probably doesn't determine how smart you are in a practical sense, but it does determine like an upper limit of like what your brain structure can actually do. The same way a computer can never use more RAM than it has.
Alex, I'm gonna cut that out, but continue. Okay, I was just joking, Alex. Don't worry. But yes, in that sense, yes. But I think that's not an argument. That's not something people are against. So it's not really an argument.
Oh, it's ties into fantasy racism.
Yeah.
That other races can be, they wouldn't just be humans, but with horns.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, honestly, because there is certain, since it's complicated because in our world we don't have that because like they're apes, they're
Yeah, we
monkeys.
killed
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
else.
they're
That
apes that
that was
and they
different.
can learn sign language. So are they as and they are like apes as well. So but they cannot breed with humans, sadly. As much as I have tried with my experiments, my dark
That's getting
experiments.
clipped.
Yes, in D&D, of course.
No, that was
This is all hypothetical. This is not real, but yeah. So yes, uh,
Well, there's
there
nothing
is
ordained.
there between species there is something different between them. I will agree to that, but
The problem here is there's
if
no
you're
way
at
we
the
can
level where
verify.
if you're at the level where you can when you can have a language and you can write, it's it's quite different than if you're at the level of an ape, for example, which they
Can
can
But
I
then
use an
again,
analogy?
but then again, what even is language? Because like we're still looking at this from anthropocentric perspective. I did study philosophy, and philosophy of language was like one of like my top subjects and subjects that I was most interested in. So I know for a fact that like language is tricky. Like the way we define language and what intelligence and sapience is to language makes sense because there are some cases of like people who have been brought up in some terrible circumstances and never like learned proper language, and they act demonstrably different, and their like perception is demonstrably different. So in many ways I would agree with some of the philosophers of language that like our understanding of humanity and what it means to be human is directly correlates to what's like your usage of language. So sure, but then again, just because something isn't human doesn't mean it's not sapient, doesn't mean it's not sentient, and
Oh, I'm not implying that
doesn't
at all.
no, I'm not saying you're implying this. I'm just saying that just because we have this conception of like if it's human it's sapient, therefore only humans are sapiens. That's an obvious logical fallacy. So like we could have things, non-human entities that are absolutely way more intelligent than humans. I mean, machines are just that.
yeah, my concern, or not my concern, actually, it's just what I want to hear from you, Alex, is why is this like the argument you just made? I think no one will disagree on that, but I want to understand why is it important for fantasy racism?
It's if you want to have like a real discussion on the topic, like a hypothetical. That's the entire point of like speculative fiction, and I never see it actually take advantage of that. So an example would be, let's say one of the other species that What's It Does was around. They might have fundamentally different wiring that would that also accomplishes sapience. But here's a good example: if two computer programs do something, do the same thing, but accomplish it in different ways, that can result in different things down the line.
Well, Star Trek has some fantasy races that do are neural neurodivergent, especially the Vulcans, which are they don't have emotions and they are logical according to the lore, and they are stronger. I think stronger and smarter in the book smart sense that they can retain more knowledge than the humans are. So it is I think that piece of media does address that, but it's never.
I in the D&D sense, we're specifically talking about the fantasy end of speculative fiction, not the sci-fi one.
Although science fiction and fantasy, that they are adjacent, they're not that far apart from each other. So I think it's okay if we veer into sci-fi a little bit. But
Oh,
what I wanted.
if you do, yeah, there's far more examples of this question actually being treated seriously if you allow sci-fi.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. No disagreement there.
What are, yeah, but with this discussion, what are we trying to say about the neural diversity of fantasy races? That
I'm not sure. I
That's a
didn't go
good
into
question.
an argument. I went to just actually discuss the topic. Our
You
views could
didn't.
change.
You did.
yes,
You
but
didn't think that far ahead.
yeah,
But one thing. It,
species with different brains think differently, and
yes, for that reason, there are a lot of like sapient races in fantasy in D&D. Let's stay within D&D that are absolutely like you could talk about fantasy racism in that regard that exist and that are sapient. They're just not player character eligible. Like a big example of this are, I don't know, elementals, which are intelligence. You just can't play as one. Like for multiple reasons. The main one being that would in many ways be overpowered, but mostly because you can't really think like an elemental would.
I mean
Oh, that's a really good point.
there
The
are
only other
the
reason I
there
think
are the Genasi, and you could homebrew that race to play as them, but
well,
Well,
I
yes,
think we're talking about
but the Ganassi are specifically descendants of elementals and humans. Like elementals that are human enough to have relationship with a human, and then you have a Ganassi. So
yes.
again, this of course goes into a whole other kind of worms, which is that apparently elementals and humans are also the same species. Which fucking what? But whatever.
let's go into that
Not
can of
going
worms.
there. Not going there. Not going there. But the point is that like it wouldn't be possible to play as something that is demonstrably non-human, even if it is fully sentient. Even if it is fully sentient, like the only way you can do it is like at GA you're role playing that and you're showing some of it, but you can never internalize it, which is why you can't play as this.
That's a really good point. I think the only race that might screw that line is the official lore on lizard folk,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I, this is all very
which are
interesting.
canonically all sociopaths.
Yeah, this is all very interesting,
Yeah.
but I want to know what's the point of talking about this.
I have no idea.
The point is that there doesn't have to be a point. Things are valuable just for discussion of them in and of itself. If you just want to talk about things with a logical point that matter, nothing that gives life meaning, you would
But
talk
okay,
about because it would just be how do I get
let's-
food and shelter.
Yes,
But okay, let's
just,
talk about.
I just want to understand how this relates to fantasy racism.
This is a good question, and maybe it doesn't really relate to fantasy racism that much. But like, let's stay within fantasy racism, and like let's think. So, would you, Alex? Like, what is your point with fantasy racism? Would you like want to see more of fantasy racism? Do you have like experience with games that revolved around fantasy racism?
This mostly started by a thought experiment. Because I was thinking about what would happen if the other humanoid species, if any of the other ones survived, and like thinking of the implications of that, and then that got me thinking about D&D.
Oh, I see. I mean, I guess this is an interesting thought experiment for D&D, particularly because, yeah, like you said, that there might be examples of that in D&D. Although I still posit that most of them are like human enough that it wouldn't come up. Like it would just be normal racism in a fantasy setting.
I think the
Because
main thing I want to say is I feel like in fiction there's a lot of devaluing of things that are sapient, but also very alien.
Yeah,
The human condition is held up as the apex of possible existence.
and also the point of note here is that it will largely depend on the setting, because there are some settings where like fantasy races, different races, where like elves are more like the classical fae, the classical fae from Irish and British and Scottish mythology, where they are like demonstrably inhuman, have inhuman thought patterns, and in many ways they are evil, but not really. They're just like they're elves that they are different. They live in their own like fairyland, which isn't constrained by our ideas of it. So in those types of scenarios, like playing an elf or like there being elves, they would obviously suffer what Alex is describing as fantasy racism, because there would be like no point of connection between them and broader humanity. But in some settings, in most settings, I would argue, like dwarf is just a different culture of human, basically.
I think it's really hard to have like a ingrained in the game itself, like a discussion on this, because the the play the player characters are played by real people, so it's like it's up to them how they define
Oh, I guess this is maybe probably like was a general thought in fantasy settings in general, not just from like the perspective of a D&D game. So
Yes.
Yeah,
NPCs in the lore and stuff.
but
But
also
for
like
example,
for
like
the sake of,
this is
yeah.
something funny I noticed that on live streams that I have watched and playing the game myself, many barbarian players are actually like not always, of course. I don't want to make only sit deal in absolutes, but most barbarian players actually play really smart and want to do smart things, but their character cannot think of the smart thing to do. So it's but sometimes either the DM says your character could not come up with that, or the barbarian orc seems to be the planner and the logical person in the room, and they make the plan when the wizard does not make the plan, even though he should, based on the supposed intelligence he has.
I think this ties
Yeah.
back into like the topic that I caused us to go on a tangent on, which we were originally talking about, and that is what the hell do the different stats actually represent?
Yeah.
Like,
And
what is charisma?
the way I usually, oh, don't get me started on it. Like what I think the most about charisma, you got me started on it. Right, Alex, you got me started on it. So
That's the
the
whole
most
point of the
thing,
podcast. You guys talk about
the
charisma
most
now.
thing. That's true. Yeah, it's okay. Welcome to podcast where you talk about specifically charisma in D&D.
Oh my god.
Hey, the topic of this podcast was D&D, not fantasy racism. Your second
Yeah, no,
topic. Go on about
I
charisma.
hate I absolutely hate how charisma represents also in many ways, and it's like ingrained that it represents good looks because
No,
there are few things that are more subjective than good looks. So like
I I want to play devil, no, not even devil's advocate, but I I believe that they have said, the developers or wizards have said that charisma does not represent good looks.
yes, they have said this on multiple occasions, but this is like just maybe this is just because of the way I've been playing, but this is a sort of a tradition. This is ingrained in the minds of players who have played D&D that like if you have high charisma, obviously you are handsome. And the way I try to always look at this, and the way I try to convince GMs that I have been playing with, is that it's the stats are less about like, especially stats like charisma, which represents your social influence in many ways, like how well you are conducting yourself in social situations. I always tried to argue that this isn't so much about what you are doing, but this is more about how you are perceived. So like, even if you are a complete asshole to everybody, if you have high charisma, people will find that charming for one reason or another. Maybe you only meet with weird people who just consider that charming, but that's what they will consider it as.
Yeah.
So this is how I was trying to look at it. Like it's less on what you are doing and how you are acting. And intelligence is the same. Like if I'm playing a Sherlock Holmes character, I don't want to come up with Sherlock Holmes-esque plots where like I immediately deduce things, because obviously I can't do that. I'm an idiot. Obviously I can't be Sherlock Holmes, but I want to feel like a Sherlock Holmes. So even if I come up with a completely insane idea of what is actually happening, I would want my GM to be like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. What? He's Sherlock Holmes. He deduced it. He is the most intelligent of all of you. Fuck you. He got it right.
I think
Yeah.
one of my favorite memories of tabletop is the time I fucking called it. I did a Sherlock Holmes. I did an insane Sherlock Holmes detection. And then the GM was like, no, no, no. And all the other players shit on me like, that was crazy. Cut to half a year later, I was right about fucking everything with my insane deduction from like nothing. From just one word. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like I like to play like strong characters, like that, but it is kind of sad that I cannot play strong characters that are also graceful, or like, I mean I can, but it is less optimal for a build. Like
You can if you have a good enough roll.
yes, but I
Depends
normally
on your
use
strategy.
I normally use point by anyway. But that aside, the thing is like it's sort of like how building constraints, and limitations can be good in games as well, and it is, it, but D&D is about role playing, so it is, why cannot not make like a, it kind of constraints of how your character can look and how you can maybe build them, and it is weird, isn't it? Because like what the things do. For example, like dexterity does a lot of stuff, but like for example, it controls your AC, for example. But one could argue that your strength score could also influence your AC if you just say it, because armor also increases your AC. So you couldn't just say that your strength makes your body so hard that you cannot be pierced by normal things. But
If you're going by
Yeah, but that's-
fantasy
right,
logic,
but-
definitely. But if you're going by like just how muscles work, the buffest guy in the world is no more impervious to a sword.
yeah, actually,
Yeah.
the fattest guy is for bludgeoning damage. He's he's less affected by bludgeoning damage than a muscular guy would be. But yeah, I'm
The
talking about
difference
fantasy
muscles
here.
make in a fight goes away the second you bring in real weapons.
But also on that note, if you are like doing some training, then you're obviously going to get more agile in the process. Like there are no people who are like really tall, muscular, powerful, and they're good fighters that are going to be slow, but they're gonna punch like a truck. This is a very weird gamey idea of how strength and dexterity work.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
if you are investing in your body, you're investing in all of it. You don't just do lifting training but don't do any endurance training. Like
Yeah,
this is not
I
how
have a
people
great
train.
example of that. How do you describe a character with like legendary the durability, but shit strength everything else?
Just a huge mass of flesh, just the fattest person imaginable. That's how I would envision this.
That's one way. Or the reverse, like a character that like has really high dexterity or strength, but not the other physical stats. All three of them go together, and if you only minimax one, it's kind of silly to think about.
The way I always envisioned a character who has like huge strength but not much dexterity and constitution, I just imagined them with like having incredibly buff arms, but like completely normal, regular lower body. So just arm man, just huge fucking arms. Everything else is completely normal, but just like completely cartoonishly too large arms. And I imagine that if you have a person who is like the torso guy, the arms guy, and the legs guy, together they form one complete unit of a person.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can't. I'll say, like, not to give too much away, because on the incredibly small chance anyone that plays my D&D group comes, there is some magic in Shorty Squad. Once you get two short, small-sized creatures to stack on top of each other and do bullshit like that with a coat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And actually, and even given the fact that a lot of like small creature stuff doesn't work on medium-sized creature, there is a good argument to be made to make like a full Shorty Squad team where like everybody is a short character. You have no idea how much fun that can be. Where like everybody is
Oh,
short and
I've
can
done
do.
some bullshit being like... So think of this. Artificer with all the wizard stuff, 20 intelligence, and being small as a goblin.
By the way,
Because-
we should just play. By the way, we should just play D&D at some point and turn that into a podcast. Why don't we just play D&D? Like you got me into a mood for just playing D&D now.
All right.
So this is the podcast within podcast within podcast. We're going to pull up Roll20 right now and start rolling up characters.
Yeah, let's go, guys. All right. We're gonna. How many sessions do you want? Like a 72 session? No, let's start small. Let's start with 10 sessions, and then we can continue this podcast. And after that,
Yes.
we can continue
Right.
the redo.
People don't want to see
We
your
can go
character.
back. We can. Yeah. After that, we can go back to redo the healer. It's
Yeah.
gonna be in 3 years. See you soon, guys. Bye.
Yeah. See you soon, guys. It's been a lot.
Good night,
fun.
Internet.
But once you see this, we'll have done every session of D&D, so don't worry about it. All right, guys, let's go play some
Sorry.
D&D. Hello, guys. Okay, so we just finished playing the D&D sessions. So,
Yeah, that was
no,
a doozy. What were we even talking about before this happened?
oh, we were talking about D&D actually and fantasy
Yeah.
racism. But okay,
Oh yes, that's what. Yes, that's where it all started. Yes, fantasy racism.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
that
Oh,
was
yes,
definitely
of
where it
course.
started, and no topics before it. Definitely
Okay.
not.
Okay. Now a lot of your character's decisions during these sessions, Alex, they start making sense because it all started with fantasy racism. Okay. Now it makes sense.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, but I think I had a great character arc, and when we stabbed the noble family, that was really cool. But I wasn't
yeah,
expecting to slaughter the whole Grover family, Eminem.
You know,
Hey.
okay,
I had
guys,
explosives on my hand.
the only
Yeah.
fantasy racism I see is NASCAR. Okay, so I think that's
I mean, I know like the whole
Okay.
country in the revolution is about like equality and shit, but the dragons had to go. Can we all agree on that?
Wait.
Did the right thing, killing all the
Wait.
dragons.
What? Titan. What are you talking about?
I
The
made,
real fantasy racism is
all
NASCAR?
right,
What?
yeah, I'm ending the podcast. My joke did not go well. Let's go back to talking about redo of a killer. Okay.
No. Wait. Actually, you said NASCAR. What NASCAR?
Oh my god.
Oh, you know the massacre. It was the time that all those political prisoners, like, we didn't have room to store them. You know, when we were helping the revolutionaries take over those fields.
I have no idea what
North
you're
of the
talking
Academy
about.
of Wizards.
I have no
Obviously.
idea what the two of you are talking about right now, and I'm trying to understand Titan's joke, and I'm failing.
Do you know NASCAR?
Do you mean the car racing company?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So this is gonna be a podcast where we talk about NASCAR. So this is a podcast within a podcast within a podcast within a podcast within a podcast where we talk about NASCAR.
Okay, no, I think we really should go back and finish talking about redo of a killer. Okay.
Yes, we should. But here's the
Okay,
thing.
let's-
Let's have a podcast and just have it be that joke about the NASCAR repeating over each other for the normal length of the podcast.
We might talk about NASCAR next week, but
We just have a
for now-
whole NASCAR episode where it's like, we're going to talk about NASCAR now. And it's just that second repeating.
Yeah. We might talk about NASCAR next week.